I am seated at my desk with a pen in hand as I write down the events of tonight while they are still fresh in my mind. It has hardly been an hour since the haunting affair, and though I am still shaken, I try my best to put the words you see before you down on paper. I hope to be as plain with the facts as I can so that those more astute than I can at least draw from my account, and hopefully explain what it was I could have just lay witness to. It all started when I, my wife Ellen, and our son James moved from London into our new house on the outskirts of Danforth. It is a comfortable two-story English cottage, which overlooks Baskermire Moor from atop a hillside perch. Upon arriving, we were welcomed warmly by the townsfolk. The neighborhood children took an almost immediate liking to James, and even Ellen, who was oftentimes quite shy, had soon found a group of women with whom she could occupy her time. It was a bit more than a month into our stay that we began to hear certain stories about the surrounding area. People from time to time would tell us tales of strange lights that could be seen on the moor at night. And always they would warn whenever they told these stories that whatever you do not go out and try to follow the light. I thought these just rumors at the time, and over the nights I never saw so much as anything peculiar to give the matter much thought. But on a foggy Sunday evening in April, whilst my family and I were having supper, I noticed a flicker from out of the corner of my eye. Outside the dining room window, I could see a glowing green light bouncing along the horizon. I realize now I should have never said a word, for when I brought it up, just as a passing comment, James leapt from his chair and ran to the window to have a look. He asked me what it was, and I told him, as I genuinely did believe at the time, that it was just someone with a lantern out on the moor. But James was enamored with the light from then on, as much as I would rather not admit. We saw the lights 2 more times. The second time was after we'd spent a late night in the barn after one of our horses had a miscarriage. We saw the lights while we were seated on the fence after the job was dealt with, and James asked if it was really the light of souls that had been lost on the moor. I told him that I didn't believe that to be the case at all, and that if it wasn't the light of a traveler, it was likely just a faraway clump of fireflies giving the illusion of a singular light. The third time was tonight, the day after Ellen passed. A sudden fever had overstayed its welcome, and Ellen was bedridden for a month, her condition worsening with each coming day, until she at last succumbed to the illness. The doctors were at a loss for an explanation, and all efforts to treat her had been in vain. She at last died softly, with no sign that she was suffering from pain so much as a terrible drowsiness. I was heartbroken. It felt, as it still does, as though a pit had opened in the earth and swallowed me inside, casting my world in a horrible darkness. I was numb with disbelief, and if it was rough for me, I can't even begin to describe the effect it had on James, who cried furiously for many hours without pause. The night that I am writing this, James and I saw the light again. James became adamant that he wanted to go and see it. "It's Mom! It's Mom!" he kept crying. He insisted over and over that he needed to go out there, and each time I denied him. I explained to him just how treacherous the moors could be in the dark, with pockets of marsh that he could sink in like a stone if he wasn't watching where he was going. I thought I got through to him, but when I came to his room to kiss him goodnight, I was mortified to find his bed empty and his window wide open. There is nothing quite like the instincts of a parent when their child is in danger. I had for months been reluctant to go out on the moor, but at the slightest suspicion that James might be out there, I had on my galoshes and a lantern in hand without so much as a second thought to slow my actions. I ran out onto the moor, crying his name. "James!" I yelled at the starless night. There was no answer, but I soon came across a trail of footprints, size 4, that could only be from his little boots. I followed them deep into the marshland until the light of the cottage had all but disappeared behind the scant mist that clung in the air. I shined the lantern on the ground and avoided to the best of my ability any bit of land that looked too treacherous to stand on. I saw a green light in the distance, and I remembered the stories. Don't follow it, don't go near. But to my horror, I saw with my lantern the tracks turn and head towards where the light gleamed eerily in the mist. I would like to remind the reader that, at this point, I still believe the light to be that of fireflies or burning swamp gas or any similar meteorological event than anything remotely approaching the realm of the supernatural. And so, I walked toward the green glimmer. As I got nearer, I could see that it floated perhaps 6 feet off the ground. But before I could get a closer look, my eyes fell to something on the ground that my lantern had stumbled across. A little black cap. It was James's cap, floating in the middle of a mossy puddle that I could see was deceptively deeper than it looked. I cried his name again and again, not caring what could hear me, but the only sound was the chirping of crickets in the distance. I collapsed to the ground, my knees sinking several inches into the muck. Tears came to my eyes and I wept. But as I cried, I noticed the ground around me getting brighter, and I realized with a sickening twist in my gut that the green light was above me. Though I was paralyzed with fear, I felt as well an anger that burned heatedly in my soul for this unexplained force that had likely led my son to his death. But when I looked up, I could hardly believe my eyes. There was Ellen, as beautiful as she had ever looked, draped in an emerald aura as she floated above the marsh where James's cap lay. In her arms was James, lit in a similar ghouly glow. His back was to me as he sat curled in his mother's arms, as if the poor lad were tuckered out. I tried to speak to them, but neither seemed to acknowledge my presence. Ellen's eyes were only on the boy, as she cradled him like she did when he was a baby, stroking his cheeks like I remembered she so often liked to do. My eyes were wet as I watched this all in disbelief, until at last the two of them turned and strolled softly away. I resisted the urge to follow. I knew that they wouldn't acknowledge me if I caught up to them, and that I would more than likely join them if I were to run after them along the Baskermire at night. I like to think what I saw was a grief-stricken fantasy. But I know what I saw, and I know that no amount of tragedy could get me to see things that aren't really there. Those are the facts as they stand, and let the experts decide if I'm honest or mad. But I'll be looking for them. As soon as I can through my windows onto the moor, whenever a green light appears, I'll be looking to see if it's Ellen out there, with little James in hand.